From the Startup Experts community, this is the Becoming Better podcast, and I'm its host, Jesse Fries.
Sarika, I'm so glad that we're finally sitting down. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a couple of weeks now. Would you mind introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. First of all, thanks for having me. I too have been looking forward to our conversation. I'm Sarika Lamont. I am the Chief People Officer at Vidyard. Vidyard is an AI-enabled video tool, often sort of positioned and used within revenue-generating teams, particularly within go-to-market, so sales especially, and marketing. And I've been here now for about 3 years.
Amazing. How did you first get into HR?
I guess my journey actually, coming out of undergrad, I went to University of Virginia, and when I was there, they did a lot of interviewing. Companies would come and, check us out. And I actually started, my first job was actually working for Philip Morris USA, which then got brought up underneath Altria, which is a tobacco company, most notably known for like Marlboro and Parliament and all that. So I worked in that industry, actually within sales and marketing, for about the first 6 years post-college. And then while I was there, I got my MBA. They paid for it. So I was like, why not? I'm going to give me a free MBA. So I worked full-time and then went part-time to GW. And I think being in the Washington, D.C. area and being so close to the government, pretty big industry in our areas, management consulting with a specific focus on supporting various, federal government agencies. So it was always in the back of my mind, the elements of what I really like to do in my role at Philip Morris was working with my clients and my customers and problem solving. Obviously in the industry was in the tobacco industry, but it was really got me thinking, I'd love to work closer with customers and clients. So management consulting felt like just a really natural progression as the next thing I wanted to do, especially since I knew I didn't want to move to Richmond, which is where all signs would, lead at Altria. So after the first 6 years of doing that, I found my way into management consulting. And a lot of that was solving, operational and organizational challenges for our clients. And so I think that experience early on taught me to think in systems and outcomes and really think through, because it's consulting, so it's professional services essentially for the government, you start thinking a lot about people and how do you, how was I going to learn the skill set and deliver? And then eventually as I moved into management and leadership, how do I then really think about enabling my people to deliver consistently and driving some really notable outcomes for what at the time was like various government agencies and clients. I sort of fell into HR, I guess, by way of strategic talent development. It was the second sort of management consulting firm I worked at. When I joined, I was employee 60, I think. By the time I left 8 years later, we had grown from like a $25 million company to well over $200 million. We had scaled, had different sort of milestones. I started off as a program manager, then into portfolio manager, and eventually, because I worked in our corporate office and we were growing so rapidly, I saw so many things happening on the operational front. And I just was in a great position to be able to lean in. Like, I just was curious. I'm like, oh, let me help this, or I could do this. And I kind of found my way doing a lot of different things in a lot of different functions, which got me, I think, really thinking about how the business was going to operate, how we were starting to see silos in the business, how to break down those silos. So I did a lot of different things. It's more of a problem solver. I got thrown into different roles just because I was there. I'm like, I could figure this out. I could do contracting one day, or I could go do compliance this day, or I could do risk management here, and I could start up new contracts and problem solve with clients. And so I created a lot of roles along the way. And then the second role that I created sort of fell into, okay, hey, we're growing. We need to differentiate by way of people and culture. How do we differentiate from a lot of these other government consulting firms? And for me, it was like, we need to do talent, invest in talent differently. So I pitched an idea around integrated talent management and built a framework and pitched it to my CEO. And he's like, this is so cool, Sarika, but I want to sell the company. And I'm like, that wasn't part of our plan. And then eventually brought in a new CEO. I was private equity backed. I did a lot with M&A and integration, and then pitched the idea. And that's kind of how I jumped into I could do this. Give me 1 year. I'm going to do A, B, and C. And if I could do A, B, and C, and these are the outcomes I'm going to drive within 1 year, then you let me build a team. I've proven to you that there's something here. And the new CEO pitched it to the new private equity board, and they're like, okay, you can do this. This is like a pillar of our strategies around people and culture. And I did it. And so that's kind of how I started. I eventually left there. I became the VP of talent there. Started to dabble more into the HR side, which was, we had that sort of segmented. We had a head of HR and then we basically had a head of talent development. And then that got kind of hard. We're trying to find the intersection between the two, not unlike a lot of people. And back in 2018, 2019, HR was really transactional, not as embedded in the business. So started to really help drive that change. And then eventually I was like, I need to do more of this, but I want to own all of it. And there wasn't a way to do that there at the time. And so I stepped away and I joined my first tech company by way of an external mentor of mine who, interestingly enough, she was a product leader at the time. She had been a product leader at Ceridian, and then eventually stepped in to be the chief people officer, which was interesting. It's like your first sort of, it's cool to see a product leader make their way and think about HR in the context of product. She took them through an IPO, and then when she stepped away, she was like, okay, what's my next thing? I just met her on LinkedIn. I was like, I love the way you think. I haven't seen a lot of people do what I do, like come out of not have an HR background, but kind of find my way into it. And then eventually she's like, I need someone like you to come and help me build and scale this big tech company that's going to IPO. Come do this with me. And that was my first foray. Actually, it was 2020, right as COVID was starting. And it was like, come help me build this and let's do this on a global scale. And you will kind of own the function end to end. And so I got to do what I did on a smaller level, 1,700 employees, now 2,500, 7 countries with, I think they had done about 30 acquisitions by that point and they were going to IPO. So that's kind of my story, how I got into HR, which was an interesting one. And I just really love the work that I'm doing here in this space. So
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And your story actually in somewhat is an opposite of my journey. I started doing recruiting in light HR and ops, actually worked for USAID when I lived in Washington, D.C.
Oh, no way.
And at some point I moved to moved to San Francisco and started doing tech recruiting and got into, building out recruiting functions. And then I sort of on a lark decided I want to get more into sales and marketing. So my career kind of went the other way. Yeah. So that's interesting to hear. I always feel like having my early career background really serves me well in what I do now. And I imagine the same would be true for you as well. Having that
totally
management, sales, and marketing background would help you.
Totally. I mean, and it's cool because you did it in sort of recruitment, HR tech, kind of in that space. And then now you're doing it on the consulting side, but in an industry that you really understand from like a practitioner perspective, which I imagine probably lands really well with a lot of the customers and whatnot that you work with within Sequoia, because it's like, okay, you get my language, you get what I'm saying. I think the cool thing, doing it like I'm like the reverse of you, or like the inverse, is I've seen and built and scaled businesses. I've done that a couple of times now. And so I think the interesting thing is understanding the business side and having worked in a lot of different functions on the business side. And also being that I worked on like site with clients, it's just an interesting perspective to bring into a people function and position the people function to be, hey, but like you need to understand the business, like you need to get in there, and this is how you can like really drive about a lot more impact in understanding the business. And because I understood the business, I understood the business speak, I understood P&L, I understood the challenges they were facing from a people perspective a lot differently. And I think I carried a bit more, just a different type of credibility that allowed me to really help drive more of that integration between, the business strategy and the people strategy, and could speak in the business, speak on the people side. And, you've gotten to know me. I'm pretty extroverted. I love getting in there and meeting people, mentoring people. So it just felt almost like it was a natural sort of transition and pivot to make in my career. Like it just felt like a lot of my strengths I could really bundle up in a very different perspective. But it's interesting also, Jesse, like it was hard to get credibility more from the HR side of it. A lot of HR folks at the time were just like, well, you don't get what we do. Like, you don't know HR. And I'm like, yeah, but I could figure it out. I know the business side. And I think there's something to that. Like if we could just divide, or we could come together and help each other see both sides. Like I think this is what's going to make that transition from HR being looked at as like a cost center and a transactional function to being a real proactive business enabler and a cost, a revenue generator if you looked at it differently. But it took some time. to really get people to see it that way, particularly HR side, which is always interesting to me when I reflect.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. I mean, it's so much about, working with each other, which is, in part, why we created Startup Experts, finance, ops, and HR is we all work cross-functionally. So being able to communicate and work with one another is super important.
Totally. No, I love, and that's like probably one of the early things that attracted me to Startup Experts. It wasn't just about HR leaders. It was, I think it is so important for these functions to be able to speak from the same sheet of music and really partner. And I've learned so much from folks in different backgrounds because of that. And I really like appreciated that the community that you've built and sort of where that's going and continues to evolve. It's important for HR leaders to really get that perspective.
Startup Experts, certainly we are all there for each other professionally, but we have built so many amazing personal relationships. Is there one thing that, perhaps you can share with our team about you personally and maybe something that you do that others might not know about?
Outside of work.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, wow, okay. I'm a mom of 2 young kids, 13 and 11, who are very much into their sports. My son plays basketball. My daughter is a competitive cheerleader. So honestly, a lot of my time gets spent in with them and particularly with my daughter. So honestly, I'm a cheer mom through and through. I spend a lot of time really understanding what she does, how to, support her. We're traveling a lot, whether it's privates or competitions. So I spend a lot of time. And then of course with basketball, a little bit of dividing and conquering. So a lot of my time gets spent with my children, which is great.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. Likewise, $2 as well. So, this is Becoming Better with Startup Experts. One of the things we love to focus on is, lessons that you've learned in your career. Is there one thing that you've learned recently that has just made you, a better human, better employee, better teammate?
Totally. I would say the biggest thing for me is pausing before reacting. As HR leaders, HR executives, we get a lot of influx of information, constructive or otherwise. And I also am a problem solver. And so I always want to jump right into the solution and let go, 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 go. And I think something that I've been really keen and leaning into is pausing before reacting, especially in the moments of tension and uncertainty. So, for me, it's just allowing me to become more of a calmer, more thoughtful leader and one that creates a bit more psychological safety and even environments like right now where it's really hard making this transition in an AI era. So for me, it's remembering leadership doesn't have to have all the answers, but it's my responsibility to sort of create the conditions for others to really be able to lean in and thrive and solve challenges, and me just being sort of a place for them to have someone to talk to. So I think for me, that's helped me to become a much better, calmer, more supportive leader.
That's a great perspective. In part, we're here because you were selected to be one of our 25 leaders to follow in 2025. I realize we're sort of at the back half of 2025 already, which is amazing. This year has gone by so fast. Congratulations. Is there anything that, is a new initiative? I mean, you've mentioned AI, but certainly talk about AI, but anything else that excites you that you're really leaning into now that might actually become a 2026 initiative at this rate?
Yeah, no, honestly, it is in the realm of AI and automation. I'm leading that transformation inside of our business, which I think is exactly where it should live, is with HR executives. And so for me, it's really leaning in, not just with my own team, but helping all of our different functional areas to really reimagine how they are working and challenging them to shift their mindset a little bit about, AI is not here to take your job, but how can you leverage AI in a way that will elevate your impact so you can drive more of those business outcomes and also so it won't take your job, right? It's just been an interesting transition to make with our organization. How do you integrate that thoughtfully, responsibly? How do you really think about the impact? How do you stay really curious and helping people really gain that confidence and driving that enablement with the use of AI? That for me is going to continue to be a 2026 sort of focal area. Just a lot to be done in that realm. And so that still remains. I was a little more nervous maybe coming into 2025, but very quickly I was like, I want to do this. I want to lean in on it. And it's definitely fueling a lot of my excitement and energy inside of my business and outside the business. So still going to be a priority for us in 2026. So yeah, that's a big one for me.
Yeah, no, I think you're not alone. I mean, there's so much room for disruption and learning and just, personal growth through the use of these new tools. As you look backwards in your career, has there ever been a moment, this is the classic 2020 hindsight moment, that you did something that you maybe not regret, but you certainly would have done differently. And I love to hear these stories from senior leaders
Yeah.
because it helps earlier individuals in their career journey learn from that.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's always good to reflect. It's interesting. Earlier on in my career and even like as I've grown into leadership, I've always equated impact with pace. I've always also worked at a lot of like small companies that like need you to operate with urgency. And so for me, it was always about moving fast, delivering more and saying yes to everything. But that also could come at the expense of clarity and capacity for myself or my teams and burn people out. And so I think looking back, I don't regret, I wouldn't change anything because I learned a lot with that mindset. And I think there's a moment in time in your career when you're learning a lot. And before you kind of get into more of an executive level role, you do need to do a lot of that, especially right now when like we're in like probably after the internet being created is like the next big innovation boom and you need to stay curious is like just sustainable success, right? And focusing in particular areas, like knowing what to say yes to, knowing what to say no to, or maybe not right now, like, is not actually a weakness. It's actually thinking more strategically about where the business needs you. And I think that realization and reflection has helped me lead and shape the way I lead differently today, both within my team and the broader organization. So prioritizing fewer, more meaningful priorities that are tied very closely to the business and driving business growth and outcomes is really where I'm spending a lot more of my time with my teams. And I think what we're realizing is it's giving my team and other teams space to do better work and driving better outcomes that they can quantify without burning them. And so for me, that's been a really great realization that I'm trying to infuse in the way I lead today.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great perspective. I mean, the small incremental goals that are obtainable certainly can produce a lot more final results than trying to hit home runs and trying to take on too many projects. So, I really love that perspective. As we wrap up here, is there one single piece of advice that you could share out to the community that has served you well?
Yes. Don't always chase titles and money. Money and title will come. That does not always translate to success. I look at careers as a lattice. Sometimes you go up, sometimes you go back, sometimes you go left, sometimes you go right. I've done a lot of that. I've done a lot of pivoting. As we talked about, I've moved from like one function to other functions. I feel like the best career moves I've made is when I've always centered the question, asking myself, where can I add the most value? While also being most myself. Right? What are my strengths? What are my superpowers? And how can I leverage that in driving more impact for the business, even if it means driving impact somewhere else than maybe what I used to. So, that has been a big lesson learned for me. It's what I tell a lot of the folks that I mentor is like, money will come, title will come. Talk about what you're going to learn, what skills you're going to create, what kind of experience are you going to gather, and how does that tie into sort of like your broader career aspirations. And it's okay sometimes to go left and right and not feel like you always got to go up. Right. That's a big one for me. And I've stayed true to that for a long time and still stay true to that sort of mindset even today in any decisions I make about my own career.
Yeah, no, it's extremely solid advice. I appreciate that and certainly can relate to that as well. Wanted to thank you for your time and sitting down. Congratulations again for being chosen as one of our 25 leaders in 2025. It's been a joy. I can clearly see the passion and energy that you have towards this topic and know why the group here just selected you. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate all the recognition.
Thank you for listening to this Becoming Better with Startup Experts discussion. If you're interested in learning more about our community and perhaps joining, please visit www.startupexperts.us.